So Ravens flock, now that the draft is over, I wanted to do a video giving out draft grades. Now, I wanted to emphasize that this is just simply what we all could possibly grade it on paper, because none of us really know how well this draft is going to age. It may age perfectly, it may age badly. I don't want to act as if this is all set in stone already, because one thing I've definitely noticed over the years from watching draft videos, not just draft videos, but watching the NFL draft and watching fans' reactions, and not just Ravens fans, but fans of teams across the NFL, it always seems like every single year, every fan base believes that they just had the greatest draft of all time. And how often does that really happen? Typically, it never happens. So, especially with a team like us, where over the past 7 years that Eric DeCosta has been the GM, there have been a lot of misses. There have been some good picks, but there also have been a lot of misses, especially because we've had the most draft picks in the NFL over the past 7 years, which I don't mind a GM missing here and there because nobody's perfect. But my main issue has always been the unwillingness to trade up and hoarding all the picks. But that's neither here nor there. I'm still going to grade it based off of how it looks on paper and did we address the holes on the team. I'm going to have 3 things that I consider the criteria for what I'm going to base the grade off of. Number 1 is going to be how talented is the player. And when I say talented, I got to put out the disclaimer that everybody that got this far and, to get drafted in the first place, all of these guys are in the top 1% of the world when it comes to playing football. But y'all know what I mean when I say talent. I mean just who has the most upside, who's gonna actually be a game changer and be a star, or but that's the number 1 thing I'm gonna base it off of. And then the second thing is gonna be how much did we need a player at that specific position that this draft pick actually got picked at. And then the number 3 thing I'm gonna consider is how likely is it that this particular player is going to make the roster by the time the season starts. So the first player, the player we got in the first round, Malaki Starks, the safety out of Georgia. From a talent standpoint, I think it's a 9 out of 10. I was going to say 10 out of 10, but there's somebody else on this draft. There's somebody else that we drafted that I want to give a 10 out of 10 to. We're going to get to him in a little bit. But Malaki, very smart guy. His football IQ is insane. He's a great instincts. He's a really good safety. I really like the fact that many people were making his comp with Jesse Bates. I've always liked Jesse Bates. I thought he was a pretty underrated safety, especially during his days in Cincinnati. Whenever we played the Bengals, I used to just hate having to see him on the field because I didn't want to see him make a play. But I have high hopes for Malaki Starks. As far as how much we needed him, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a 4, believe it or not. I know he's a really good player. Just we already have 4 safeties, and on top of having 4 safeties, we have a star safety in Kyle Hamilton. Then we also have a solid starter in Ardarius Washington, who's worked his butt off to get a starting spot. And then we have 2 developmental players in Bo Braid and Sanusi Kane, who, if our coaches are good at their job in their second year, they should be more polished and more capable of getting on the field and contributing. So because of that, I'm like, man, we got high-end talent, we got respectable starters, and then we got developmental players who we hope we can maximize. Because of that, I don't think we really needed a safety that badly. It's fine. Again, having him is still good. Like, he's still a great player, but I don't think we needed him that badly. So I would say 4 out of 10. As far as his chances of making a roster, that's a 10 out of 10. Like, he's a first-round pick. He's also better safety than 3 out of our 4 safeties, so I'm positive that he's going to make the roster. I think that's a no-brainer. Overall, I would grade this pick an A-. I was going to say A+, but again, when it comes to how much we needed a safety specifically, I just don't think we needed it that badly. I know the Ravens want to have 3 safety sets, but again, we have depth at safety. We have solid starters at safety. We have a superstar at safety, so I don't think it was a desperate need compared to some of the other positions on the team. But still, I think A-. I think that's still a good pick, still a good draft pick that'll probably age pretty well for us. As far as the next pick, Mike Green, 10 out of 10 as far as talent. Excellent pick. Was a little surprised that he fell this far, of course, because this is a legitimate case of somebody who has first round talent falling out of the first round, unlike David Ojabo. But Mike Green is a beast, super explosive, massive potential. This guy can finally be that top tier edge rusher that we all have been hoping for, that guy who other teams start to scheme up against instead of just scheming up against our entire defensive line and trying to stop whatever the scheme is. They're going to be focusing in on just this one guy if he lives up to his potential. He was very productive in college. So as far as talent, 10 out of 10. How much did we need him on a scale of 1 to 10? I would say an 8 out of 10. I was going to say 10 out of 10, but at the same time, I was like, we have so many edge rushers already. So technically, we didn't need him that much as far as we have so much depth at the edge rusher position with all these draft picks. But of course, we don't have the high-end talent. We have depth. We have respectable starters in Kyle Van Noy and Odafe Owe. But when it comes to superstars, there's no superstar on that team when it comes to edge rusher. So even though I wanted to give that a 10 out of 10 too, I was trying to be more objective about it. And I would say 8 out of 10 because we have a lot of depth in starters. We just don't have the high-end talent. We don't have that superstar, and Mike Green has the potential to be that. His chances of making the roster, I think it's a 10 out of 10. Overall, Mike Green, I think it's an A+. I think that's a no-brainer to say. I think we all can agree on that. In the third round, we picked Emery Jones Jr., the tackle/guard out of LSU. He played right tackle during his time at LSU, but when he was drafted, he was listed as a guard. So I'm assuming it was already communicated to him that we're going to probably move him inside into the guard position where he can hopefully replace Daniel Faalele immediately. And from a talent standpoint, I would say a 7 out of 10. I think he was a very solid player at LSU. He played with a lot of violence. He had very quick feet, unlike other people who are currently starting at the guard position for us right now. He also has experience playing a high level of competition from playing at LSU. He was teammates with Will Campbell, so he's already used to playing alongside people who are highly talented. So I have high hopes for him. As far as how much we needed him on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a 10 out of 10. We desperately need guards. We need guards at all costs. Prior to this draft, I had no faith in the guards that we currently had on the roster. So I was very excited to see us get Emery Jones. I think there's potential for him to win the start. If all things are fair, I think he should have a shot at winning the starting job before the season even starts. His chances of making the roster, I think it's a 10 out of 10. Again, we don't have as well prior to this draft. I don't believe we had as much depth on the offensive line as I would have liked. So he's gonna make the roster in all likelihood. I said this was an A-. I graded Emery Jones as an A-. So the next pick I had was Teddye Buchanan, who was the linebacker out of the University of California. As far as talent, I would grade it a 7 out of 10. I think the Ravens' logic when it comes to getting him is hoping that he has that playmaking potential and he can be a running mate with Roquan Smith. As far as how much we needed him on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say like a 7 out of 10. You know, we've had an ability to find respectable veterans who can come in and be starters for the team, but at the same time, we could use somebody younger and cheaper, and I'm sure that's what they were going for when they drafted Trenton Simpson, of course. But so far, it seems like Trenton Simpson has not worked out yet. Like, there's questions as far as if they're gonna keep Trenton Simpson beyond this point. We all know last year Roquan seemed like he was a bit distracted trying to help Trenton and overcompensate for him. So I feel like we need a guy like Teddye. I don't think it's a desperate need, but you know, it's something that we could use, of course. As far as his chances to make the roster, on a scale of 1 to 10, I feel like it's an 8. I think he has a pretty solid chance of making the roster, all things considered. Overall, I would grade Teddye Buchanan, the draft, I would grade it with a B plus. I think it's a pretty solid pickup, especially once you get to day 3. Everything in day 3 is a coin toss at that point. We really don't know. The next pick we got was Carson Vinson, the tackle out of Alabama A&M. As far as talent, I would grade it about a 7 out of 10. I know a lot of people are worried about him not being used to playing the highest level of competition, but I think overall he'll be fine, especially with that size that he has at 6'7", with one of the longest arms out of anybody in the draft. And I think he should be fine. So, I mean, we'll see. As far as how much we needed him, I would say at 9 out of 10. You know, we need depth on the offensive line in general, but definitely when it comes to tackles, because right now, prior to this draft, we only had Ronnie Stanley and then Roger Rosengarten as our starters when it comes to the tackle position. And even though I'm happy Ronnie Stanley is back to being like kind of like his old self, I'm still a bit concerned, of course, because, you know, 3 out of the last 5 years, Ronnie Stanley has been hurt. So you would like to have a backup plan just in case he gets hurt again. So I think that we were in need of a tackle. As far as his chances of making the roster, I would say 9 out of 10. You know, he would have to be historically bad for them to just say, okay, we're not even going to try this anymore. And even then, he still might stay on the team, because you look at a guy like Falele, I don't care what that Pro Bowl nod, I don't care about a Pro Bowl nod. Falele is clearly not good, and they still keep him on the team strictly just because of, in my opinion, just because of his size. Like, he's 6'8", 400 pounds, and they just don't want to let that go. So I think Carson will make the team. I graded Carson, the draft pick of Carson Vinson, a B. The next pick was Bihlal Kone, who was a cornerback. As far as talent, I gave it a 6 out of 10. As far as how much we needed him, I gave it a 3 out of 10. You know, like, we have so many cornerbacks. We draft so many cornerbacks. We sign so many cornerbacks. So because of that, I don't really expect much out of this pick, to be honest with you, but who knows? Maybe he ends up being a shocker. As his chances of making the roster, I think it's a 3 out of 10. You know, for his sake, I hope he does, but in all likelihood, I don't even think he's gonna make the roster, to be honest with you. I would grade this a C. The next pick we had was the kicker, Tyler Loop. As far as talent, I graded that like a 7 out of 10. As far as how much we need him, I graded that a 10 out of 10. Like, we need a new kicker. We should have been looking for a new kicker a while ago, but the Ravens at times, and I said this on many other occasions, they're very reactive and not proactive. I wish they were more proactive, because you don't want to wait until something becomes blatantly obvious to try to make a change in that area, because once it's blatantly obvious, it's already too late. It was already starting to show that Justin Tucker needed to be replaced and was starting to fall off like 2 years ago, but they didn't do anything about it. And then once it gets to this season, it becomes blatantly obvious that Tucker is past his prime and he's falling off. And then when you combine that with the whole scandal thing, it's like, you know, you got to get rid of him at this point. So how much we needed Tyler Loop, I would say it's a 10 out of 10. His chances of making the roster, I would say 9 out of 10. I would have said 10 out of 10, but for whatever reason, we have not gotten rid of Justin Tucker yet. I know Justin Tucker is legendary, but at the same time, I think we should have already moved on from him at this point. But the chances of Tyler making the team, I think, are pretty high. All he has to do is just be a competent kicker. Like, nobody's asking him to set the new record as far as the longest field goal. We just need him to be a competent kicker who could come in and not cost us games. So overall, the Tyler Loop draft pick, I would grade that an A. The next draft pick is LaJohntay Western, who's the wide receiver out of Colorado. He also played at FAU. Like, this guy, as far as talent, I would say 7 out of 10. Like, even if he's not like a wide receiver who has a whole lot of hype, at the end of the day, throughout his college career, he was able to produce everywhere that he went. Like, he was able to produce all throughout his 5 years in college. I think that should count for something. As far as how needy, like how much we needed a wide receiver, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a 6 out of 10. You know, wide receivers, we have 5 on the roster already, but we don't have a true number 1 wide receiver. And I'm not saying LaJohntay is going to be that. I don't think he will. But because of the fact that we don't have a number 1 wide receiver, by default, I'm going to say that we still kind of need another one. We have solid wide receivers, but again, D-Hop is past his prime. Zay is the number 2 that we kind of forced into a number 1 spot. Bateman has the potential to be a number 1, but he's only produced like a number 2 or number 3 up until this point, and he's been injured a lot, so you can't really guarantee that he's gonna meet his potential. So I would say we needed a wide receiver. It wasn't desperate, but we still kind of needed one. And as far as his chances of making the roster, I would say it's a 9 out of 10. We have an open spot. We have one more open spot at wide receiver. I think he's going to make the team, especially when you combine him being a receiver with the fact that he's also a guy who does well on special teams as a returner. I think John Harbaugh is going to like him. I think it's almost a guarantee that he makes the roster. I would grade this pick a B. The next pick was Aeneas Peebles, who was the D tackle. As far as talent, I would say 7 out of 10. I think he was a pretty fun interior defensive lineman to watch. That's why I said a 7 out of 10. As far as how much we needed him, on a scale of 1 to 10, I said 10 out of 10. Because, I mean, look, Michael Pierce just retired. Travis Jones is probably not getting paid by us. Like, we already paid Matabike. It's unlikely we're going to pay another D tackle. So Travis Jones is probably gone next year. So there's going to be open opportunity for Aeneas to actually not only make the roster, but become a really, really solid starter and rotational player this year and next year. So I would say how much we needed him, it was a 10 out of 10. As far as his chances of making the roster, I would say it's again a 10 out of 10, because I think there's going to be open space next season, and we could always use somebody who's disruptive in the trenches, and at the college level he was disruptive. So the next pick we had was Robert Longerbeam, who was the cornerback out of, I believe it was Rutgers. As far as talent, I put him at a 5 out of 10. How much we needed another corner, again, I'm gonna just say a 3 out of 10, because we have so many corners. We drafted so many corners. We signed so many corners. Like, I don't even think he's really making the roster. His chances of making the roster, I said a 3 out of 10. I graded that a C. And then the final pick of the draft was a guard, Garrett Dellinger, somebody that before the draft I liked. I mocked him going to us. He played at LSU alongside Emery Jones and Will Campbell, so he's used to playing that high level of competition. As far as talent, I would say a 6 out of 10. As far as how much we need him, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say a 10 out of 10. Again, it's a guard. I don't have faith in the current guards that we had prior to this draft, so I definitely think that we needed people like him. His chances of making the roster, I actually think it's an 8 out of 10, believe it or not, even though he's a 7th round pick, because again, I don't have faith in the guards like that, so that makes me a bit nervous. So for guys like Garrett and Emery, if they just grind and work hard and show out in the preseason, I think there's a high likelihood that he can make the team, especially because we don't know. Well, we do know they're not paying Daniel Falele, so he's going next year. They re-signed Ben Cleveland, but Harbaugh hates Ben Cleveland, so if they could get rid of him, they will eventually. So there's gonna be open spots available on the roster for a guy like this. Overall, I graded this draft pick a B. So as far as this draft as a whole, I think they addressed pretty much everything we could have wanted them to address, as far as the trenches, the secondary, the kicker position, the skill position. Like, they pretty much went everywhere you could realistically go, which that's exactly what they're supposed to do, because they kept all 11 of their picks. On paper, I think it was a pretty solid draft. I would give this draft like a I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna give this draft an A minus. I was gonna say B plus because of EDC's track record of missing on so many of his picks, but I'd rather take a more positive approach here. I'm gonna just say it's a A minus type of draft, especially because we were able to get somebody like Mike Green in the second round, and if somebody like Emery can become a immediate starter, I would be extremely excited, especially because Malaki is probably going to be a really good safety anyway. So that would mean that our first 3 picks were hits, and I would be extremely ecstatic about that. But let me know, how do you feel about this draft? Would you grade this draft an A? Would you grade this draft an F? And who was your favorite player or players from this draft class?